There is a kind of loneliness that does not come from being alone. It comes from being married to someone who looks right through you. Someone who sits across the dinner table every night for 42 years and never once asks what you are thinking. That was my first marriage. My husband, Thomas, was not a cruel man. Not in the way you see in movies. He never raised his voice. He never raised his hand. He simply forgot me. He forgot my birthday. He forgot that I liked peonies, not roses. He forgot that I existed unless he needed his shirts ironed or dinner on the table. For 42 years, I told myself that this was what love looked like. Sacrifice. Silence. Staying small so he could feel big. When Thomas passed away from a heart attack in his recliner, I sat in the hospital waiting room and felt two things. First, a deep, aching sadness, because I had loved him once. A long time ago. I had loved the way he laughed at stupid jokes. I had loved the way he held my hand at our wedding. That man had disappeared somewhere along the way, replaced by a stranger who snored in my bed. Second, I felt relief. And then I felt guilty for feeling relieved. The nurse brought me cold coffee in a styrofoam cup. I held it in both hands, letting the warmth seep into my fingers, and I made a promise to myself. I will never beg for respect again. I will never shrink myself to make someone else feel comfortable. I will never let another person treat me like furniture. I was 61 years old. I had silver in my hair and lines around my eyes. And for the first time in my life, I was free. That was 5 years ago. I did not know then that freedom was just the beginning. I met Richard at the grocery store. It sounds silly, I know. A romance born in the produce aisle. But that is where it happened. I was reaching for a cantaloupe on the top shelf, and my shoulder twinged. That old arthritis acting up. I stretched anyway, my fingers just brushing the rough skin of the melon. Then a hand appeared next to mine. A gentle hand. Older, like mine, with soft wrinkles and clean fingernails. The hand plucked the cantaloupe easily and held it out to me. I looked up. The man was tall, with kind blue eyes and white hair combed neatly. He wore a simple flannel shirt, the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He was smiling, not a flashy smile. A quiet one. Looks like you've got good taste, he said. This one's perfect. A little soft at the stem. That's how you know it's ripe. I took the cantaloupe. Our fingers brushed. His were warm. Thank you, I said. And then, because I was not used to being helped, I added, I could have gotten it myself. He laughed. It was a soft sound, like gravel rolling downhill. I don't doubt that for a second. But why struggle when you don't have to? That sentence stayed with me. Why struggle when you don't have to? I have been struggling my whole life. Struggling to be seen. Struggling to be heard. Struggling to be loved. And here was a stranger telling me, without even knowing it, that I deserved ease. We talked for 20 minutes in the produce aisle. I learned that his name was Richard. He was a retired high school history teacher. His wife had passed away 6 years ago from cancer. He had one daughter, a grown woman named Vanessa who lived in the city. He learned that I was a widow, that I had one daughter named Claire, that I spent my days gardening and reading mystery novels. You have kind eyes, he said, before we parted ways. I blushed. At 66 years old, I blushed like a schoolgirl. You have kind hands, I said back. And I meant it. He asked for my phone number. I gave it to him. That night, I sat in my rocking chair by the window, watching the fireflies dance over my rose bushes, and I smiled so wide my cheeks ached. My daughter Claire called me at 9 o'clock, like she did every Tuesday. Mom, you sound different, she said immediately. I was stirring tea in my favorite mug. Different how? Happy, Claire said. You sound light, like a weight lifted off your chest. I told her about Richard, about the cantaloupe, about his kind eyes and his soft laugh. Claire was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Mom, you're glowing. I looked at my reflection in the dark window. The moon was full. My silver hair caught the light. And she was right. I was glowing. I felt like a young woman again, like the world was full of possibility, like love was not just a memory, but a promise waiting to be kept. I did not know then that a storm was coming. Her name was Vanessa. Richard and I dated for 8 months before he proposed. 8 months of Sunday brunches and evening walks. 8 months of holding hands in the park and watching old movies on his couch. 8 months of me learning that a man could actually listen when I spoke. He proposed on a Tuesday. No grand gesture. Just the two of us, sitting on my porch swing, a cup of chamomile tea in my hands. "Margaret," he said, reaching into his pocket, "I know I'm not young. I know I don't have much. But I have a lifetime of love left in me, and I want to give it all to you." He pulled out a simple gold band. No diamond, just a thin, elegant circle of gold. "It was my mother's," he said softly. "She would have loved you." I started crying, not sad tears, the good kind. The kind that wash away old pain and make room for new joy. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, Richard. Yes." We decided to have a small wedding, just family, just the people who mattered. Richard wanted to have dinner at his daughter Vanessa's house to share the news. "She's just protective," he said as we drove to the city. "She's been that way since her mother died. Don't take it personally if she seems cautious." I squeezed his hand. "I understand. I was cautious once too." Vanessa lived in a modern house on the edge of town. Glass walls. Sharp angles. A black front door with no welcome mat. She opened the door before we knocked. Vanessa was tall, like her father, but where Richard was soft, Vanessa was hard. She wore a black blazer, even though it was a Saturday evening. Her hair was pulled back so tightly it looked like it hurt. Her eyes were the same blue as Richard's, but colder, like winter sky right before a storm. "Dad," she said, kissing his cheek quickly, "you're early." "We're excited," Richard said, beaming. Vanessa looked at me. Her gaze traveled from my silver hair to my sensible flats, pausing on my simple floral dress. I saw her make a calculation. I saw her decide that I was not worth her time. "Margaret," she said, not unkindly, just flat, like she was reading a name off a list. "Thank you for having me," I said. "Your home is lovely." She did not say thank you back. She just turned and walked inside, her heels clicking on the marble floor like little hammers. Dinner was uncomfortable from the first bite. Vanessa's twin boys, Jacob and Joshua, were 7 years old. Sweet boys with sticky fingers and loud voices. They asked me questions about my garden. Did I have tomatoes? Could they come see the roses? I promised them a visit soon. Vanessa watched this interaction like a hawk watching a snake. Her husband, a quiet man named Mark, said almost nothing. He just cut his steak and stared at his plate. I got the sense that he had learned, over the years, that silence was safer than speaking. Then Vanessa put down her fork. "Dad," she said, pushing a piece of salad around her plate. "Not eating it, just moving it. I'm happy you found a companion, but we need to talk about assets." The word hit me like a slap. Companion, not fiancé, not family, not future stepmother to her children. Companion, like a dog, like a piece of furniture. I felt my smile freeze on my face. My hands, resting in my lap, began to tremble. I pressed them flat against my thighs to still them. Richard laughed nervously. "Vanessa, please. We're here to celebrate. We have news." But Vanessa would not be stopped. She finally turned to look at me, and her eyes were cold and sharp like winter ice. "My father has a small pension and a paid-off house. I've worked too hard to build my empire to see it chipped away by a late-life romance." The room went silent. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. I could hear Jacob whispering to Joshua under the table. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Claire dropped her fork. It clattered against her plate, a sharp sound that made everyone jump. "Excuse me," Claire said, her voice rising. "What did you just say to my mother?" I put a gentle hand on my daughter's arm. Her muscles were tight, coiled like a spring. I knew she wanted to fight. I knew she wanted to stand up and scream at this woman who had insulted me. But I also knew that anger would not help me here. Vanessa wanted a reaction. She wanted me to cry, or shout, or storm out. She wanted proof that I was exactly what she thought I was. A fragile old woman looking for a free ride. I would not give her that satisfaction. I had been insulted before. I had been dismissed before. I had been called just a housewife, and just a secretary, and just a mother for 66 years. I knew this dance. I looked at Vanessa. I held her cold gaze. And I said very quietly, "I have no interest in your father's house, dear. I have my own." Vanessa smirked. It was a cruel, ugly expression on her otherwise beautiful face. "A small condo in a retirement village doesn't count, Margaret." Claire gasped. Richard opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. I simply picked up my fork and took another bite of salad. The salad tasted like ashes. But I chewed and swallowed like it was the best thing I had ever eaten. That was the first cut, but it was not the deepest. The deepest was yet to come. I am not a woman who gives up easily. After that dinner, Claire begged me to leave Richard. "If his daughter is going to treat you like that now, imagine what she'll do after the wedding," she said, pacing my kitchen, her arms crossed tight over her chest. I was washing dishes. The warm water felt good on my aching knuckles. "She's scared, Claire." "Scared? Mom, she called you a gold digger in front of everyone." I dried my hands on a towel. "She's scared of losing her father. She's scared of being replaced. Her mother died. She's been the most important woman in Richard's life for 6 years. Now I'm here and she doesn't know how to handle it." Claire stared at me like I had grown a second head. "You're defending her?" "I'm understanding her," I said. "There's a difference." I decided in that moment to win Vanessa over with kindness, not because I was weak, because I was strong enough to be kind to someone who did not deserve it. For the next 6 months, I tried everything. When Christmas came, I baked Vanessa's favorite childhood cookies. Richard had mentioned once, in passing, that she loved snickerdoodles with extra cinnamon. I spent 3 days perfecting the recipe. I packed them in a tin lined with red tissue paper. I tied a silver ribbon around the lid. I gave them to her at Jacob and Joshua's school play. She took the tin with 2 fingers, like it might be contaminated, and said, "Thanks." Then she handed it to Mark without opening it. I watched Mark eat the cookies in the car on the way home. He ate 6 of them. That was enough for me. When Vanessa got the flu in February, I heard about it from Richard. "She's miserable," he said, worry creasing his forehead. "She never gets sick. She doesn't know how to handle it." I made a pot of my grandmother's chicken soup, the kind with tiny noodles and fresh dill. I drove 45 minutes through freezing rain to bring it to her house. She answered the door in a bathrobe, her face pale, her hair a mess. For just a moment she looked like a little girl. Vulnerable. Tired. Then she saw me and the wall went back up. "I don't need anything," she said. "I know," I said, holding out the soup. "But I had extra." She took the pot. She did not say thank you, but she did not close the door in my face either. I called it a small victory. When her boys had a birthday party in April, I offered to help. "I can watch them while you set up," I said. "Or I can make the cupcakes. Whatever you need." Vanessa looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "Fine, you can watch the boys. Don't let them eat sugar before the cake." I spent 2 hours playing hide and seek in her backyard. Jacob and Joshua climbed on me like I was a jungle gym. They pulled my hair and tickled my sides and made me laugh so hard I cried. When Vanessa came outside to check on us, she saw her boy sitting in my lap, listening to me tell a story about a frog who wanted to be a prince. Her expression was unreadable, but she did not tell me to leave. Every single gesture I made was met with ice. But the ice was thinning. I could feel it. I just did not know how deep the water was underneath. The breaking point came in May. Richard wanted us to visit Vanessa at her office. "She's been promoted," he said proudly. "CEO of the whole company now. She wants to show off her new corner office." I put on my best lavender dress, the one I wore to Claire's wedding. It had lace sleeves and a skirt that swirled when I walked. I pinned my grandmother's brooch at the collar, a small gold rose with a pearl in the center. Richard wore a suit. He looked nervous. His hands shook a little as he drove. "She's just intense," he said, as we pulled into the parking garage. "Don't take it personally." I had heard that before. Vanessa's office building was all glass and steel, called impersonal. The lobby had a waterfall feature that made a constant, rushing noise, like a river trying to drown out all conversation. The receptionist was a young woman with a perfect ponytail and a frozen smile. "Ms. Richards is in a meeting. Please have a seat." We sat on a white leather couch that was so stiff it felt like sitting on a cloud made of cardboard. I smoothed my lavender skirt. Richard checked his watch every 2 minutes. 30 minutes passed. Then 40. At 45 minutes, I stood up. My arthritis was screaming. My lower back ached. I walked to the window and looked out at the city below. Tiny cars, tiny people, all of them rushing somewhere important. Finally, the receptionist's phone buzzed. "Ms. Richards will see you now." Vanessa's corner office was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows on 2 sides. A massive oak desk that probably cost more than my first car. A bar cart in the corner with crystal glasses and expensive whiskey. Vanessa did not stand up when we entered. She did not offer us a seat. She just looked at me from head to toe, taking in my lavender dress, my grandmother's brooch, my sensible flats, and said, "Dad, I have a board meeting in 10. Make it quick." Richard cleared his throat. We wanted to talk about the wedding. Vanessa laughed. It was a short, ugly sound, sharp and hollow. "The wedding? You're actually going through with this?" "I love her, Vanessa." Vanessa stood up then. She walked around her massive desk and leaned against the front of it, crossing her arms over her chest. Her posture was aggressive, closed off, like a principal about to expel a student. She looked directly at me. "All right," she said, her voice drooping with condescension. "Let's be adults about this. I want a prenup. I am not risking my future on you." I blinked. A prenup. I had heard of such things, of course. Rich people used them to protect their money. Movie stars and business moguls. Not retired secretaries and retired history teachers. But here she was. Asking for a prenup from me. A prenup. I said, just to make sure I heard correctly. "Yes," Vanessa said. "You're a retired secretary, Margaret. My father has a house. I paid for half of that house. I'm not going to let you walk away with equity because you made him happy for a few years." The words landed like stones in my chest. Retired secretary. Made him happy for a few years. Not going to let you walk away with equity. Richard turned red. His face flushed all the way to his ears. "Vanessa, that's enough." But I held up my hand. I stood up slowly. My knees cracked. My back protested. I smoothed my lavender skirt with hands that were perfectly steady. I looked the young CEO right in the eye. And I said, "Smart thinking. I agree." Vanessa's smirk froze. "What?" I said. I repeated, my voice calm as still water. "Smart thinking. Then let's have my lawyer draft one." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. She was confused. She had expected me to cry, to beg, to turn to Richard and demand he defend me. Instead, I was agreeing with her. "Your lawyer," she said, a sneer creeping back into her voice. "You have a lawyer." I smiled. It was the kind of smile that did not reach my eyes. The kind of smile I had perfected over 42 years of marriage to a man who ignored me. "I have a very good one," I said. That night, Claire called me, frantic. "Mom, what are you doing? She's trying to humiliate you." I was sitting in my rocking chair, looking out at my garden. The roses were blooming, pink and red and white. The air smelled like honeysuckle and damp earth. "I know, sweetheart," I said. Let her. Let her. Mom, she thinks you're a gold digger. She thinks you're after Dad's pension. You need to tell her the truth." I rocked back and forth. The chair creaked softly. A familiar sound. A comforting sound. "No," I said. "Not yet." You see, Vanessa made a critical mistake. She assumed that because I was a widow in my 60s, I was powerless. She assumed that because I wore simple clothes and lived in a quiet neighborhood, I had nothing. She assumed that because I was kind, I was weak. But Vanessa did not know my story. Let me tell you now what I had never told anyone. Not Richard. Not Claire. Not a single soul. When I was 35 years old, married to a cold man who ignored me, I started a small business. It was just a hobby at first. A way to pass the long, lonely hours when Thomas was at work and Claire was at school. I designed custom embroidery patterns for high-end quilts. I had always been good with a needle. My grandmother taught me when I was 7 years old. She said I had a gift. I started selling the patterns online. This was back when the internet was still new and noisy. Dial-up connections and AOL discs in the mail. Nobody believed you could make money on the computer. But I did. That hobby grew. Quietly. Steadily. Like a seed planted in dark soil, reaching for the sun without anyone watching. I never told Thomas. He would have laughed at me. He would have said it was a waste of time. So I kept it to myself. I worked in the early mornings before he woke up. I worked in the evenings, after he fell asleep in his recliner. I did not buy fancy cars or big houses. I did not wear designer clothes or expensive jewelry. I invested. I bought land when land was cheap. I bought stocks in companies that made things people actually needed. Medicine, electricity, food, the boring companies. The ones that never made headlines but always made money. I was patient. I was disciplined. I played the long game. By the time Thomas passed away, I was not a poor widow. I was a silent millionaire. I owned 3 commercial buildings downtown. They housed a dentist, a law firm, and a small coffee shop that made the best scones I had ever tasted. I had a portfolio that paid me more in dividends each month than Vanessa's CEO salary. But I never told anyone. Not because I was ashamed. Not because I was hiding. Because I wanted to know who loved me for me. Not for my money. When Richard came along, he did not know. He fell in love with my kindness. My cooking. My laughter. He never asked for a penny. He never asked about my finances. He just loved me. That is why I loved him. But now, Vanessa had poked the bear. I picked up my phone and called my lawyer. Her name was Helen. She was a sharp woman in her 50s with grey-streaked hair and reading glasses on a chain. She had handled my affairs for 20 years. "Helen," I said when she answered, "I need a prenuptial agreement, but not the kind they're expecting." Helen laughed on the other end of the line. It was a low, knowing laugh. The laugh of a woman who had been waiting for this call for a decade. "I've been waiting for this call for a decade, Margaret. What's the plan?" "Draft one that protects everything I've built," I said. "Every building, every stock, every penny. And make sure they don't see my balance sheet until they sign the disclosure agreement." "With pleasure," Helen said. I could hear the smile in her voice. 2 weeks passed. Vanessa's lawyer, a young aggressive man named Brad, sent over their version of the prenup. Richard brought it to my house. He looked ashamed. He could barely look me in the eye. "I'm sorry, Margaret," he said, handing me the thick document. I told her this was too much. But she wouldn't listen. I took the document. It was heavy. Dozens of pages covered in legal jargon. I read every single page. It was brutal. The prenup left me with nothing. No claim to Richard's house. No claim to his pension. No alimony. No nothing. If Richard died before me, I would have 30 days to move out of the house we shared. 30 days to pack up my life and leave. Claire came over that evening. She read the document over my shoulder. Her face turned red. Her hands balled into fists. "Mom, you can't sign this," she shouted. "This is slavery. This is cruelty." I set the document down on my coffee table. I took off my reading glasses. I rubbed my eyes. "I'm not going to sign it," I said. "But tear it up. Throw it in the trash." "No," I said. "I'm going to send it to Helen. And then we're going to send back our version." Claire stared at me. "Our version?" I smiled. "Our version." Helen sent back the revised prenup 3 days later. My version was simple, elegant. Fifth, it stated that both parties would fully disclose all assets. Both parties would keep their own assets separate. No one owed anyone anything. If Richard died, I would keep what I brought into the marriage. He would keep what he brought. No fighting. No lawsuits. No drama. It was fair. It was legal. It was kind. Vanessa's lawyer, Brad, called Helen 3 days after that. The conversation was short. "Your client's disclosure form," Brad said, his voice shaky over the phone. "There must be a typo." "Helen," who was sitting in her office with me on speakerphone, looked at me and grinned. No typo, Brad. She claims to own 3 commercial properties and a portfolio worth. Are you seeing this? I see it clearly, Helen said. Margaret and Hastings has a net worth approximately 10 times higher than your client's. There was a long silence on the phone. I could hear Brad breathing. Shallow. 10 times, he whispered. 10.3 times, to be precise, Helen said. Now, does your client still want the prenup? Or shall we tear it up and let the marriage proceed as a union of equals? Brad stammered something about needing to talk to Vanessa. Then he hung up. Helen looked at me across her desk. Well, Margaret, the ball is in their court now. I nodded. Thank you, Helen, for everything. It's been my pleasure, she said, for 20 years. That evening, Richard came to my house with tears in his eyes. He stood on my front porch, his shoulders shaking, his face wet. The setting sun turned his white hair gold. Margaret, he said, his voice cracking. Why didn't you tell me? I was standing in the kitchen, stirring a pot of chicken soup. The same recipe I had used for Vanessa when she was sick. The smell of dill and carrots filled the air. I set down the wooden spoon. I dried my hands on my apron. You never asked, dear, I said. And I wanted to know if you loved me or my bank account. Richard stepped inside. He took my hands in his. His fingers were trembling. Of course I love you, he said. I loved you when I thought you had nothing. I loved you when I thought you lived in a small condo in a retirement village. I loved you when you were just a woman in a grocery store reaching for a cantaloupe. I felt tears prick my eyes. I know, I whispered. That's why I'm going to tear up the prenup. We don't need it. Richard pulled me into his arms. He held me tight. I could feel his heart beating against my chest. Fast and strong. You are the most remarkable woman I have ever met, he said into my hair. I laughed. I'm just a retired secretary. He pulled back and looked at me. His blue eyes were fierce. No, you are so much more. But Vanessa was not done. The young CEO could not stand the humiliation. The thought that she had been wrong, that she had been cruel to a woman who was 10 times wealthier than her, burned inside her like acid. She showed up at my door that night, red-faced, fists clenched. Richard was still there. We were eating soup at my kitchen table. The windows were open. The sound of crickets filled the night air. Vanessa did not knock. She stormed in. The screen door banged against the frame. You tricked me, she hissed, her eyes locked on mine. You sat in my office like a helpless old woman and let me make a fool of myself. I set down my spoon. I folded my hands on the table. I didn't trick you, dear. I just let you show me who you are. I'll contest the marriage, Vanessa spat. I'll call you a gold digger in every newspaper. I'll ruin your reputation. Richard stood up. Vanessa, stop this right now. But I held up my hand. I looked at Vanessa. I saw the fear underneath her anger. The fear of losing control. The fear of being wrong. The fear that her father might love someone more than he loved her. I felt pity for her. Real pity. Go ahead, I said softly. Tell the world that a retired secretary has more money than you. Call the newspapers. Post it on social media. Tell everyone how a 66-year-old woman in a lavender dress made you look foolish. Vanessa froze. See how that looks for your CEO reputation, I continued. See how your board of directors reacts when they learn you tried to bully your father's fiancée. See how your employees feel when they find out you called a kind old woman a gold digger. The realization hit her like a cold wave. She could not win. Every attack would just make me look gracious. Every insult would just make her look greedy. Every newspaper article would paint her as the villain and me as the victim. Vanessa stood there, her fists still clenched, her breath coming in short gasps. Then she turned and walked out. The screen door banged shut behind her. Richard sank back into his chair. He put his face in his hands. I'm so sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry, Margaret. I reached across the table and took his hand. It's okay, I said. She'll come around. Or she won't. Either way, I'm not going anywhere. The wedding was 2 months later. A small garden ceremony, just as we had planned. We set up white folding chairs on my lawn under the old oak tree. Claire hung string lights in the branches. I planted extra roses along the path, pink ones for love. We invited only family. Claire and her husband, Richard's sister from Florida, Vanessa and Mark and the twins. I did not know if Vanessa would come. Richard was nervous. "She hasn't spoken to me in weeks," he said, adjusting his tie. "I don't know if she'll show up." I fixed his collar. "She'll show up." "How do you know?" "Because she's proud," I said, "and she won't let anyone think she's been defeated." I was right. Vanessa arrived 10 minutes before the ceremony started. She wore a dark blue dress, simple and expensive. Her face was tight. Her arms were crossed over her chest. She sat in the back row, as far from me as possible. Mark sat next to her, looking uncomfortable. The twins sat on the grass, picking dandelions. The ceremony was short. We said our vows under the oak tree. Richard's hands were warm in mine. His voice cracked when he said, "I promise to love you for the rest of my life." I meant every word I said. After the ceremony, we had cake and lemonade on the lawn. Claire had made a playlist of old songs, Frank Sinatra, Ella Fitzgerald, the music of our youth. Richard and I danced. Slowly, clumsily, his hand on my lower back, my head on his shoulder. Then I walked over to Vanessa. She was standing alone by the fence, watching her boys chase fireflies. Her arms were still crossed. Her jaw was still tight. "Vanessa," I said. She flinched. She had not seen me approach. "Margaret," she said. Her voice was flat, guarded. I reached into the pocket of my dress. I pulled out a small velvet box, dark blue, worn at the edges. "This is for you," I said, holding it out. Vanessa stared at the box like it might bite her. "What is it?" "Open it." She hesitated. Then she took the box. Her fingers were slow, reluctant. She opened the lid. Inside was a single, perfect pearl necklace. The pearls were creamy white, strung on a silver chain. They glowed in the fading evening light. Vanessa's breath caught. "This belonged to my grandmother," I said softly. "She gave it to me on my wedding day. She told me that a woman's worth is never measured by her bank account. It is measured by her grace." Vanessa looked up at me. Her eyes were wet, confused. She did not know what to do with this kindness. "I hope one day you learn that too," I continued. "Welcome to the family, Vanessa." I took her hand. It was cold and stiff, but I held it anyway. "It's okay, dear," I said. "You don't have to say anything. Just be happy for your father." Vanessa looked down at the necklace. Then she looked at her father, who was dancing with Claire, laughing at something silly. A single tear rolled down her cheek. She did not wipe it away. Later, at the reception, Claire pulled me aside. We stood near the punch bowl, watching the guests mingle. "Mom," Claire whispered, "why did you give her that necklace? She doesn't deserve it." I looked at Vanessa. She was sitting on a folding chair, the velvet box still in her hands. She was staring at the necklace like it held the secrets of the universe. "Sweetheart," I said to my daughter, "revenge isn't about making someone cry. Revenge is about making them realize they were wrong about you." Claire frowned. "I don't understand." "Vanessa thought I was nothing," I said. "She thought I was a gold digger, a helpless old woman, a companion, not a partner. Now she knows I'm 10 times her equal, and I gave her a gift anyway. A gift from my grandmother. A gift of grace." Claire was quiet. "That will haunt her more than any angry word ever could," I said. "Every time she looks at that necklace, she will remember that she was cruel to someone who only showed her kindness." Claire hugged me. "You're brilliant, Mom." I hugged her back. "No, I'm just old enough to know that living well is the only victory that matters." 2 years later, everything had changed. Richard and I bought a small farmhouse in the countryside. It had a wraparound porch and a big red barn and more land than we knew what to do with. I grew tomatoes and roses. Richard grew zucchini and corn. We argued gently about who had the better garden. I won, obviously. I started a free embroidery class for young mothers at the local community center. Twice a week, women came with their babies on their hips and their worries in their eyes. I taught them how to make beauty with their hands, how to find stillness in a chaotic world. Aunt Vanessa came to visit every other Sunday. At first, she came out of obligation, could tell. She would sit stiffly on the porch, answer questions in monosyllables, and leave exactly after 1 hour. But slowly, something shifted. She started staying longer. She started asking questions. She started watching how I treated everyone with the same gentle respect. The mailman, the neighbor's child, the grocery store clerk. One afternoon in September, Vanessa sat on the porch next to me. We were shelling peas into a big ceramic bowl. The sun was warm on our shoulders. The air smelled like apples and wood smoke. We sat in comfortable silence for a long time. Then Vanessa spoke. "Margaret," she said quietly, "why didn't you ever make me apologize?" I stopped shelling. I looked at her. She was staring at her hands, at the peas in her lap. "Would it have been real if I forced you?" I asked. Vanessa shook her head. A small movement. "That's why," I said. "You found your way here on your own. That means more than any apology ever could." Vanessa was quiet for a long time. The only sounds were the crickets and the distant moo of a cow from the farm down the road. Then she said the words I never expected to hear. "You're the strongest woman I've ever met," she whispered. "And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for how I treated you. I thought money made me powerful. I thought controlling everything made me safe." She looked at me then, her blue eyes bright with tears. "But you have something I can't buy." "What's that, dear?" I asked softly. "Peace," she said. "You have real peace." I smiled. I picked up a handful of fresh peas and held them out to her. "You can have it too, sweetheart. It doesn't cost a thing. You just have to let go of the need to control everyone around you." Vanessa took the peas. She ate one. She looked out at the roses. And for the first time in her life, the CEO had nothing to say. Richard came out with a pitcher of lemonade. He looked at his daughter and his wife, sitting side by side, shelling peas in the afternoon sun. His heart was full. I could see it in his eyes. That night, after Richard had gone to bed, I sat on the porch alone. The stars were out. 1,000,000 tiny lights in a dark sky. I rocked in my chair. The same chair I had sat in for 30 years. The same chair that had seen me through loneliness and grief and joy. I thought about Vanessa, about her cruelty and her fear and her slow, painful journey toward grace. I felt no anger, only a quiet, triumphant satisfaction. I had won. Not by fighting, not by screaming, not by rubbing my wealth in her face. I had won by refusing to become cruel. I had protected my peace. And in the end, that is the greatest revenge of all.